My name is Victor. I'm 42, and the last time my family saw me, I was supposedly flunking out of community college with a substance abuse problem they fabricated to justify why I'd stopped visiting. The irony was palpable as I adjusted my tactical vest in the parking garage of the Riverside County Courthouse. After 23 years of complete silence, here I was, about to enter the most significant federal racketeering trial in California's history. This case was poised to dismantle everything my family had constructed on a foundation of deceit, manipulation, and the methodical exploitation of immigrant labor through their seemingly legitimate construction conglomerate. I had been investigating the Moretti family enterprise for 3 years, not because of our shared bloodline that was merely an unfortunate genetic link, but because they were laundering funds for the Sinaloa cartel while treating undocumented laborers as disposable, using threats of deportation whenever they requested basic safety gear or equitable pay. 18 individuals had lost their lives in accidents that were entirely preventable. 18 families had been shattered so my Uncle Tony could acquire another luxury vessel. As the sun dipped below the courthouse, I went over the case documents one last time. Tomorrow I would give my testimony as the lead U.S. Marshal for Operation Bloodline, the 3-year clandestine investigation that had finally dismantled the Moretti construction syndicate. Tomorrow, my relatives would discover that the college dropout with a supposed drug dependency had been operating under deep cover identities for the better part of 2 decades, handling cases that ranged from human trafficking to international terrorism. But for tonight, I was just Vic, the letdown, the one who couldn't manage any real responsibility. 23 years ago. Victor's just not equipped for this line of work, Uncle Tony had declared, his voice resonating across the kitchen to where I was hunched over my criminal justice textbooks. I was 19, juggling 2 jobs to afford community college, surviving on 4 hours of sleep a night, and still maintaining a 3.8 GPA. He's too sensitive, too emotional. Just look at him. He can hardly stay awake. My mother concurred, passing another check across the table to my cousin, Marco, who had just failed out of his 2nd university but was somehow still regarded as the family's prized son. Marco has that inherent leadership ability. That's what's needed in law enforcement. I had submitted applications to every federal agency I could think of: the DEA, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals Service. Each application was a secret I guarded during family dinners where they debated whether I would complete another semester or if I should just find a suitable girl and start a family. Marco, leaning back in his chair with a beer already in hand at 6 in the evening, chimed in, "Besides, Vic has that whole bleeding heart complex, always getting upset about some sob story. You can't be effective if you're concerned about offending people." "That's precisely it," Tony affirmed. "This family has a certain standing to protect. We don't need," he motioned vaguely toward me, "we don't need weakness tied to our name." The weakness he mentioned was my tendency to ask why their construction sites had such high rates of injury, why workers seemed to vanish after accidents, and why the financial records never seemed to add up when I assisted with basic bookkeeping during summer breaks. The weakness was my concern that people were being harmed. I had ceased asking questions after Tony took me aside and explained in a very gentle tone that my college tuition funds could vanish as effortlessly as they had materialized. Family businesses demand family loyalty, Victor. You grasp that, don't you? I understood with perfect clarity. I also understood that every federal academy I had applied to had placed me on a waiting list, pending character references I was unable to furnish without compromising my own investigation, which had already commenced within those accounting ledgers. So I vanished instead. 2 years later, the U.S. Marshals Training Academy in Glencoe, Georgia, was everything my family believed I was too frail to endure. It entailed 6 months of tactical drills, firearms proficiency, legal studies, and psychological screening. I graduated 2nd in my class. My family presumed I was in a rehabilitation facility. I allowed them to believe it, to propagate tales of my drug issues and mental collapse. I let them shake their heads with sorrow when acquaintances inquired about Tony Moretti's nephew who couldn't get his affairs in order. It was more straightforward than explaining why I couldn't make contact, why I had to completely erase myself from their lives to accomplish what was necessary. The reality was, I had been recruited specifically due to my family ties. Not in spite of them, but because of them. The Marshal's Service had been monitoring Moretti Construction for years, observing the trend of workplace fatalities, the dubious financial transactions, and the manner in which workers disappeared after filing injury reports. They required an insider, someone with inherent access, someone the family would trust, someone they deemed too weak to pose a threat. Present day on the courthouse steps. The courthouse was a hive of activity with reporters and federal agents as I completed my final preparations. In a matter of hours, the largest RICO case in the district's history would commence, and I would be called to the stand as the key witness against my own kin. Special Agent Martinez, my FBI contact, came over with a tablet displaying the news reports. Marshal Moretti, the family's defense team, is already framing this as an abuse of prosecutorial power. They're asserting they were completely unaware of any illicit activities. I was not taken aback. The Moretti family had built their standing on plausible deniability and calculated ignorance. What's the status of the workers we moved? Secure. All 18 families have been transferred to safe housing and their legal status is being processed. The children are now in school, they're going to be all right. That was the crucial part. 18 families, some of whom had lived in fear for years, now had security and a path to legal residency. Their statements would substantiate the financial evidence I had compiled over 3 years of attending family meals, holiday gatherings, and business meetings while equipped with a recording device. Agent Martinez appeared apprehensive. Are you prepared for this? I realized testifying against one's own family is. They ceased to be my family the instant I discovered they were running a betting pool on which worker would perish next. It was a fact. I had discovered the betting slips in the safe in Tony's office, tangible wagers on workplace deaths, treated as some kind of morbid office lottery. The recollection still caused my hands to tremble with fury. The following morning, in the courtroom, the federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles was at capacity. It was filled with media, federal agents, defense lawyers, and in the rear rows, my family, all of them. I had not laid eyes on them in 23 years. Uncle Tony had not aged well, an excess of rich food and stress, likely from managing a criminal organization. Marco appeared unchanged, which in a way made it more unsettling. My mother sat between them, her expression a familiar blend of disapproval and concern that she had mastered during my adolescence. They did not recognize me. 2 decades of tactical training had altered more than just my stance. I was a 42-year-old man, dressed in an impeccably fitted federal uniform adorned with insignia they couldn't decipher from the back of the room. My hair was cut short and professional, my shoulders were broader from years of physical conditioning, and my face was more hardened from witnessing things they could never fathom. But I was primarily invisible to them, because they had never truly seen me to begin with. The prosecution calls Deputy U.S. Marshal Victor Ellen Moretti to the stand. The silence was sudden and total. I rose, my marshal's badge prominent on my belt, my service firearm correctly holstered, and my 23 years of federal service apparent in every aspect of my demeanor. The bailiff administered the oath as my family stared in stunned silence. Marshal Moretti, the prosecutor started, please state your current title and duration of service. I am a Deputy U.S. Marshal with the Los Angeles District, presently assigned to the Fugitive Task Force. I have been with the U.S. Marshal's Service for 21 years. Before that, I served 2 years in the DEA's Undercover Operations Unit. Behind me, someone gasped. It was likely my mother. And what is your connection to the defendants? Anthony Moretti is my uncle. Marco Moretti is my cousin. The Moretti Construction Company is my family's business, or it was, until this investigation was launched. Marshal Moretti, kindly explain to the court how this investigation was initiated. I shifted slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse of my family's faces in my periphery. Uncle Tony had turned white. Marco was urgently whispering to their lawyer. My mother looked as though she might collapse. 3 years ago, I was contacted by a joint federal task force that was looking into workplace fatalities and human trafficking within the construction sector. They required an agent who had natural entry into Moretti Construction's internal affairs. someone the family would trust, someone they would never imagine. And why would they never imagine it was you? Because they believed I was a drug addict who had dropped out of community college 23 years prior. A murmur went through the courtroom. From the back, I heard my mother make a gasping noise. Marshal Moretti, during those 23 years, what was your actual career trajectory? I listed my service history as if it were a military citation, which in many respects it was. 2 years as a DEA undercover agent, 21 years with the U.S. Marshals Service. Specialized instruction in human trafficking, financial crimes, and organized crime. Commendations for operations in 3 different states. My current role as the lead deputy on the West Coast Fugitive Task Force. And throughout this period, did you stay in touch with your family? No contact. My assignment demanded complete isolation to preserve operational security. What did your family think had become of you? They were informed that I had suffered a mental breakdown linked to substance abuse and was in a long-term rehabilitation program. They were advised against contacting me. It was a harsh testimony, detailing 23 years of deception and investigation, but it was also essential. Every aspect of their financial misdeeds, every recorded exchange, every witness's testimony of worker coercion and safety breaches, it all came out through my testimony like a flood from a breached dam. The defense lawyer was a predator in a high-priced suit, but he had no ammunition. How can you cross-examine an individual who spent 3 years documenting felonies with federal surveillance technology? Marshal Moretti, he attempted, is it not accurate that you have held a grudge against your family for a long time? That this investigation is, in reality, about personal retribution? I met his gaze without flinching. Sir, I have dedicated 23 years of my life to safeguarding individuals like the workers your clients murdered. Retribution would have been far simpler and involved significantly less paperwork. The courtroom erupted in laughter despite the setting. No more questions. After the testimony in the courthouse corridor, they were there, waiting for me outside the courtroom. All of them. My mother was the first to reach me, her face wet with tears. Vic, I don't get it. You told everyone I was a drug addict, I stated calmly. For 23 years. You allowed them to believe I was weak, insignificant, a disgrace to the family name. We were told. She stammered, reaching for me as if I were still 19 and in need of solace. I took a step back, not with aggression, but with finality. Uncle Tony came forward, his face flushed with anger. You've ruined us, your own family. We brought you up. You murdered 18 people, I cut in. You threatened families with deportation to prevent them from reporting safety infractions. You organized betting pools on which worker would be the next to die. He fell silent. Marco was next, still searching for an advantage. Vic, listen, family is family. We can resolve this. Deputy U.S. Marshal Moretti, I corrected him. And no, we cannot resolve this. You are facing a federal indictment for racketeering, conspiracy, and being an accessory to murder. But you're our family. No, I declared, my voice infused with the authority of 2 decades in federal service. I am a law enforcement officer. You are criminals. The family connection was severed the moment you decided to profit from the deaths of others. My mother was still weeping, still grasping for some image of the broken young man they had created to rationalize my absence. But we love you. We have always loved you. You loved the concept of me as a failure, I replied. It helped you justify your own decisions. The real me, the one who spent 23 years protecting the people you were killing, you never had any interest in knowing him. I started to walk away, then paused. For whatever it's worth, you were correct about one thing. I was too soft for your type of business. I could never have lived with the blood of 18 people on my hands. 6 months later, the sentences handed down were what the families deserved. Tony received 25 years to life. Marco was given 15 years. The construction firm was dissolved, with the profits allocated to victim compensation. The 18 families I had helped move sent me a card on the first anniversary of the arrests. Their children were doing well in school. The adults had secured legitimate employment with firms that respected their lives and well-being. I never had contact with my biological family again. They sent letters from prison. Tony's were filled with fury. Marco's were steeped in self-pity. My mother's were laden with guilt and remorse. I never replied. Some betrayals are too profound to be forgiven. This is not because of the act itself, but because of what it uncovers about people's true character when they believe they are unobserved. I had spent 23 years observing. The genuine triumph was not the convictions or the prison terms. It wasn't even the justice served for the families who had lost everything to my family's avarice. The genuine triumph was exiting that courthouse as the person I had always been. Someone who shielded people rather than taking advantage of them. Someone who opted for the more challenging route because it was the correct one. Someone who would prefer to be misjudged and effective over being esteemed and complicit. My family had spent 23 years telling everyone I wasn't resilient enough for their world. They were completely right. I was resilient enough for something far greater.